Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, Mediation and Beyond, where we talk about all things that matter. Today, I'm honored to have Dr. Kort, Dr. Joe Kort. His practice is mixed with straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender individuals and couples. Dr. Kort graduated from Michigan State University with dual majors in psych and social work. Yay, social work. He has a PhD in clinical sexology from the American Academy of Clinical Sexologists. And he's in the process of becoming a certified transgender therapist through the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, which I did not even know was in existence. So thank you for sharing that. They call it WPATH or WPATH. Is it WPATH?
WPATH.
WPATH, it's the standard of care for transgender medical and mental health care. Really a much needed conversation and a much needed organization, I can for sure. He's a teaching faculty at University of Michigan Sexual Health Certificate Program, certified Imago relationship therapist. I'm a big fan of Imago therapy. And he's a board certified sexologist. He knows EMDR for those who suffer from trauma. And Dr. Kort is the founder and director of the Center for Relationship and Sexual Health. So thank you for coming on today, Dr. Kort. I really appreciate it.
Sure, and I haven't updated my bio, it sounds like. I was teaching at the University of Michigan, but now I'm a co-director of a program called Modern Sex Therapy Institutes. It's mostly online. It's based in West Palm Beach, Florida, and we certify sex therapists and we provide PhDs in clinical sexology. So that's where I'm at today. That's about a year old, that bio.
Well, that's really helpful, and I will get those details from you after, and I will incorporate them in the details after our talk, so it'll be posted on YouTube for anybody that'd like to find you.
Sure.
So we'll do that. But thank you for coming on today. And I mean, I could sit here, I could see and obviously talk to you about a lot of different topics. But what I wanted to talk with you today was about, I don't want to say trends in sexuality, but I think erotic differentiation, which I think is a term that I've come across that you have utilized. But I find from patients and from clients in the past and from my own work with divorce, sex can be a very difficult conversation for couples to be having and to be comfortable with their own, I don't want to say sexual. Every time I think of the word sexuality, I think of gay, lesbian, like I'm just talking about being comfortable sexually. And so is that something that you've come across as well?
Yes. People don't understand there's a difference between sexual orientation and erotic orientation. And they don't understand sexuality because we don't really provide sex ed in our country, right?
Amen.
But sexual orientation is to whom we're attracted, male, female, both, neither, a blend of both genders, all genders. And then erotic orientation are the things that bring us to orgasm, the things that turn us on. And they don't always match up. So we may have a sexual orientation one way, but our erotic orientation takes us a whole different direction. And they both are good and okay. But they feel incompatible and in conflict for a lot of people because they don't understand.
So then somebody, let me just throw out an example here. So you could be heterosexual in a heterosexual, let's say marriage.
Yep. But
your erotic tendencies or fulfillment, if you will, can be, so if I'm the husband in a heterosexual marriage, then my erotic tendencies could be with a man.
Yes, could include sex with men.
Could include sex with men, which has nothing to do with not being in love with my wife.
And it has nothing to do with his sexual identity. Just like you can be gay, you could be a gay man and have sex with a woman and have erotic interest in women and still be gay. You know, people don't understand that there's fluidity today. You know, we talk about it in terms of fluidity, and some of that's because our erotic interest, you know, it might be too that you have what you, this is an Esther Perel line, if you don't know her. She's a sex and relationship therapist.
I love her.
And she says, what we protest during the day is what turns us on at night. So those are two different parts of ourselves, that's all.
Interesting. Okay, I've never heard it put that way. So,
yeah.
But as a partner in a relationship, if I was the wife of the husband I was referencing earlier, we personally end up personalizing everything. That
Yes.
we're not enough,
Women
right?
tend to do that. Yes.
But what you're saying is that we don't have to take it that way.
Well, and nobody's enough. I mean, I've had men take it this way too, more women than men, like you said.
Yep.
But it's not a personal thing. We all have a lot of things on our head that turn us on, including our partner. And it's not realistic. Some people can have just a partner turn them on. That can be. But for the most part, it takes a lot of different things to turn us on, including a partner. And it is not instead of, and people get threatened thinking, well, you know, we always say, it's not like, well, I have 5 children, but I can only love one. So I love this one, but the other 4, well, they're okay. No, you love each child differently. You can have erotic interests that are equal, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
favored.
Yep, yep. And so when you speak of erotic, differentiation?
Yes.
Yes, when you speak of that, you're saying, so it could be a person, or it could be toys, or could it be, or are you speaking just to an individual?
No, I'm speaking about couples. So a lot of straight couples, mixed sex couples, don't enter relationships and talk about their erotic interests. Not fully. Like gay male couples and lesbians, they, even in gay male couples, they talk about it right in their ads. When they're looking for Mr. Right, the very first thing is sexual interest and then romantic interest, so that we know right away, you know, what you're into, what I'm into, and let's negotiate that. Straight couples don't do that in general, and it doesn't come out until later. And now they realize, wait, I have this erotic interest, but it doesn't match yours, or you're disgusted by mine, or I'm disgusted by yours. So if one of us is disgusted, then that means I find you disgusting, and then we can't talk about it, and we can't do it. And then you have a stalemate, and then that's why people move to infidelity. Because if they can't talk about it, then they go get it somewhere else, rather than the couple talking.
And why is it do you find in your work, in your what expertise, why do you find that heterosexual couples don't address this? Like, we don't talk about it.
Well, we're not taught to talk about it. And as a gay and lesbian couple, you're forced to talk about it, right? You're forced to, we're 2 women, we're 2 men. How are we going to do this? And we've been forced to explore our own sexuality, where heterosexuals are just sort of moved into heterosexism, right? So you're going to find somebody of the other gender. You're going to have PIV sex. You're going to have, you know, missionary, you know, if you're going to talk about maybe other things that are standard or traditional, but erotic thoughts can be very threatening. So really, erotic differentiation is what turns me on personally? What turns you on personally? And how do we bring that together as a couple? That's what most couples struggle with.
Do most couples, how do they go into a relationship? I think a lot of people go into relationships not even knowing that.
Right, they don't know it. And I always tell people, I'll ask them when they first come in my office, how do you identify your relationship? Are you monogamous? Are you open? Are you consensual non-monogamy? Are you polyamory? Even if the couple says to me, we're monogamous, I look at them and ask, have you negotiated your monogamy? And they look at me like I have 2 heads, like, what is there to negotiate? And I'll say, well, can she or you both use sex toys privately? Can you flirt with other people? Can you send dick pics out if you want? Can you have a webcam sex with somebody in Romania you're never going to meet? And one person says, absolutely not, we're monogamous. And the other person says, well, I'm not. And so then and Marty Klein is a sex therapist, and he has this great line: couples often fight over contracts they've never made. Never made.
That's a great line.
Isn't it?
Yeah, that is so true. It's that inherent expectation that's unspoken, right?
Right. And so then people say, you should just know. And well, you knew it was wrong, so you did it anyways. We never talked about it. So for one person, porn might be enough, but another person might be, I like to have interactive porn where I'm talking to somebody on the other line. That's a line for one partner. It's not a line for the other. Never addressed, becomes a problem.
And then it can also, I guess it can, when it becomes a problem, then people will say, well, that's not monogamy. And really, how do you define monogamy? I guess would be another thing to think about, which I think most people say when we're married, we're monogamous. We don't talk or see anything with anybody else. And that's the end of it. But
that doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And why do you find that doesn't work?
Because they haven't negotiated what monogamy means to each one of them.
Okay.
So now I have to say to all my clients, what does monogamy mean to you? I don't assume I know anything anymore. And every couple is different, and every partner is different. And monogamous couples usually haven't talked about it. The open couples have talked about it. They anticipate jealousy. They anticipate problems. They anticipate lots of dialogue and conversations. Monogamous couples do what you just said. We're closed. We're off all the other social media apps, and we're worthy one and only. And it's often not true.
Is it unnatural to be thinking that we're just one and only? I'm not saying that you're endorsing anything one way or the other, but naturally, right?
I think it's unnatural. I don't think we should expect that. It can be natural to people, but we have to ask our partners, is this true for you? Now, a lot of partners in the beginning say, well, it is true for me now. I met you and you're everything to me. And that's the first 6 to 8 months, right? And then after the 8 months are gone, now it's like, well, wait a minute, I kind of want to go back to, and they don't talk about that.
Yeah, well, there's that. That's why I guess they call that honeymoon phase. But after that honeymoon phase, there's a lot of inherent assumptions based on that phase.
Yes.
And then people don't, what someone wants to bring in or do something different, and they're like, whoa, where did that come from? That was never here before. I was enough before. Why aren't I enough now?
Right.
And so,
and I can't,
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I can't tell you how many times I've heard in my office where somebody will say, I found out this new piece about you sexually. I feel like I don't know you. And then I'll say, well, wait a minute. When you are with somebody for a few years and you find out they always loved anchovies, but you didn't know that, you don't say, oh my God, you love anchovies? I feel like I don't know you. Like, sexuality is so loaded, like, why? You just learned another part to this person. You still know them. You just don't know this part.
That's a great analogy, actually. But do you think a lot of it's around shame that we don't talk about it, or ego, or a blend of both?
I think it's both, like you say, shame, and it's personal, So like, I've had women in my office, now these are generalizations, and in my practice, so I'm talking, where they are threatened by his watching porn, right? Now you notice I'm not saying using porn, because it's not a drug. Nobody uses porn. They don't use TV. They don't use Netflix. They watch TV. They watch porn. And then she becomes very threatened by it. Like, well, you're comparing those images to me. No, he's not. Often he is not. And he gets upset and jealous over her vibrator, her sex toy. He'll say, my genitals are available to you 24/7. I could have food poisoning and my genitals are available to you 24/7. You don't need that. He feels compared to that and jealous of that.
Right, when it has nothing to do with whether he's available or not, just the different way to turn yourself on, and that's what you wanted at the moment.
Autoerotic lives, those are what couples don't talk about. So when I met my husband, I'm gay, we've been together 27 years. The internet wasn't around 27 years ago. I knew what kind of porn he liked, and I looked nothing like the guys that turned him on. He knew the kind of porn I had and where it was, and he looks nothing like the guys that turned me on. We made a sex life with each other because we fell in love with each other and understood we had other tastes going on, but it wasn't a threat to the other.
That, I think that's where it comes in. It's not being a threat to the other person. Instead of saying, kind of like, I like anchovies. You don't have to like anchovies, but I do.
So we'll get half a pizza without it. Right.
Right. And so I can enjoy my pizza. You can enjoy yours, but we're still together because I'm with you because of you, not with you because of what you do sexually for me. Although that's a part of it.
Yes. And then people don't know how to have sexual conversations. I call them sexual health conversations, not healthy sex. Healthy sex implies there's a binary, healthy and unhealthy. And then the unhealthy gets determined by a partner, by a therapist. And like we talked before we started, now you start pathologizing people. And I'm not that kind of therapist.
Yeah.
Sexual health is different for each person.
Right. So would you suggest to people, let's say people, someone's going to watch this, they're not married, they're thinking about getting married, they're divorced and back in the dating world. How does somebody go about having a sexually healthy conversation with their existing partner? If you've never had it.
Yes, I've never had it. So I recommend that they begin talking about maybe getting online and looking at erotica together, or there are sites, and I'm going to forget the name of this site. There's many now where one partner can put in what he likes and enjoys sexually very explicitly. Then the other partner can put in to the website everything they like explicitly, and then it shoots out a paper that only shows what you both said you like mutually. So if you liked BDSM and your partner didn't, it doesn't come out on that form. It's called Sexionnaire. It's Sexionnaire, Sexionnaire.
I gotta write that down. So what happens if you put stuff in and then nothing comes out, right?
Yeah.
You might be onto, I like porn, I just like the missionary position, I like this, I don't like to, like, you might come out with a miss. This actually might be a good thing for couples who haven't tied the knot, so to speak, right? I mean,
you know, you would think so, except I've had lots of clients before they get married find out there's so much sexual incompatibility and desire discrepancy, which most couples have, but they have a large gap, and they still get married. And I try to say to them, be careful. I'm telling you, this isn't going to change just because you have a piece of paper in your hand, you know?
Oh, well, I guess you could use it to your benefit if you're both willing and say, well, I didn't know you liked anchovies. I didn't know any of, what are your sexual preferences? I love you. I want to honor you. Let me explore with you and grow with you. I mean, you can.
Let me stretch and try some of this on. I may not like it. Maybe I don't want to eat the anchovies, but maybe we could talk about anchovies while we're having sex. You know, maybe we could, talk about what you want to do with anchovies, but I'm not going to do it. There's so many, I always say to couples, they look at me like, well, what's the answer? I don't know. The answer is going to come between the two of you. I'm going to get you talking to each other, and you may come up with something that no one on this planet has even thought of yet. But you're going to do it with compassion. You're going to do it without one up and one down each other. So just because you don't like something doesn't mean the other person is bad or wrong or disgusting. And having being able to validate that whatever you like is what you like. They're fantasies. They're erotic interests.
Well, then, for me, that takes the concept of love to a completely different level, because people will fall in love and then want, think they're, be intimate and all of that. But if you're really in love with somebody, you honor who they are. It's not really about you create the intimacy then, and that works for the both of you, instead of trying to fit everybody in a box.
Right. And that's what couples end up doing, putting each other in a box, putting themselves in a box, and then getting resentful because they don't, like you say, they don't know another way. I always tell couples, if you can't talk about sex, then go to a sex therapist and get some help. Get some push, buy some books on sexual health conversations. There's many more out there now. There's great authors, great books. They're on the New York Times best-selling lists, and maybe read them out loud to each other,
Right. No, I think that's a really good way to put that. In terms of like helping people be able to overcome that shame part, like, does that come from youth? Does that come from our experiences? Is the shame around body image, or is everything kind of in the kitchen sink, thrown in that blender, and then we carry it out, we act it out in the bedroom?
I think it's lack of education, so we don't know.
Okay.
And we don't know what other people are doing, and we think what we're doing is wrong or bad, or because there's no norm, so then a lot of the young people today are looking at porn and thinking that's normal or that's the norm, and then we blame porn, but it isn't porn. Porn is porn. You can blame horror movies, you can blame mainstream movies that show sex looks great, you're 20 years married, you're still putting somebody on the stove and having spontaneous sex. No, it's not always like that, but we don't talk about it. The antidote to all the shame is sex education.
And you're talking sex education where it's talking about our bodies, how our bodies work, right?
Yes, not just that, and sexual pleasure. Sexual pleasure is a turnoff for people to talk about. Even though America is all about sexual pleasure, they don't like to talk about it. And for sure, therapists don't like to talk about it. When I train therapists, if I do just a presentation on sexual pleasure, I'm lucky if I get 20 therapists. If I do a talk on sexual abuse and sexual trauma, I'll fill a hotel room, 100 people coming to it. Because they'll talk about sex as long as it's a horror movie. But if it's a pleasure movie, they're done. They're out. It's uncomfortable.
That's fascinating. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, no, because I'm thinking, I'm like, oh, what kind of courses in CEUs and all those things have I taken? I'm like, well, you're absolutely right. You can fill a room on trauma.
Oh, yeah. It's easy to talk about. It's safe to talk about. But on pleasure, then I think, and I'm not blaming therapists, we are not taught, right? The mental health field has let us down on sexual health. Couples therapy, individual therapy. In school, we might get a class, and then you're done. And then it's not talked about again unless you get your own path on motivating yourself to learn about it.
Well, you know, in my grad program, I had a class on my one class on sexuality, but we had to go to a museum in the city, New York, and at first time I didn't even know it existed. First time
I've been there. Yeah,
I was ever there. I mean, it's a little different now because I've been back, but one of the, I said, you know, I would have liked the whole class to have been in there instead of doing my own tour, because I had so many questions, and I was like, it was mind blowing, really. It was fascinating to me, but I think the class would have been better in there. And you know, so I've referred couples in the past, like, to go there together so you can actually have a dialogue. Like, I went on my own because I'm like, who am I going to go there with? Would you like to come to the sex museum?
Yeah.
And I get the response, why would you go there? And so again, even though you had the shame around even kind of going. And so I think you're absolutely right on the uncomfortableness, because that's how we're grown up. We grow up that way, you know, not talking about it. And sex ed, I remember I used to be a teacher, and they'd come in one period once a week to take over my class to teach sex ed. And it was so uncomfortable for the teacher as well as for these 8th grade students, because they had such silly questions, and then the teacher would get mad. And it's like, you know, a silly question is that child's uncomfortability, but they still want to know.
Yeah. There's another sex therapist who has a great line. His name's Doug Harvey. And he says, when it comes to sex, the most uncomfortable person controls the room. You know, and so the name of my center is the Center for Relationship and Sexual Health. We grew to the point where we needed to move. This building we were in didn't have extra space. I signed a lease at another building, first month's rent, security deposit. 3 weeks before we were going to move in, they put the signs up in the directory, and a female middle-aged pediatrician in the building said, I am not okay with this. The sign has to come down. I will not have pedophiles in this building. It'll ruin my practice. Landlords called me. I said, we don't work with non-consent. We don't work with people that are pedophiles. We refer them out. Let me talk to her. I talked with her. She would not hear it or have anything to do with it. The most uncomfortable person controlled that building. And so it's all over Google. If people Google Joe Kort, you'll see I did a whole week on the news about how I had to get out of my lease and sue the landlords. It was ugly. And what they wanted me to do is take sexual health out of the name of my practice. But I wasn't going to take the name out in 2020. I'm not doing that. This pediatrician needed to get educated about that. So
well, sexual health really and pedophilia are two different things, which would say, I mean,
yes,
you got to do this.
Right, but you see, that's what people do. And in a relationship, the most uncomfortable person controls the relationship. They control my audiences. I might talk about pornography. Well, what about child porn? That's awful. I'm not talking about that. Human trafficking porn. That's awful too. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about watching erotic imagery, and people, just the pleasure part sends people.
Well, you know, and I'm not going to pick on your case here, but just taking that as an example, you have a pediatrician whose clients, whose patients are watching porn and having sexual pleasure outside of her office visit. That should be addressed during also her visit. Like, where are you at sexually? Like, how are things? So it could actually benefited.
I really thought we were going to refer back and forth. I thought it was going to be a really great situation for both of us, and it turned out to be really ugly.
Well, that's this.
Yeah.
And that's why when I saw some of your work, I'm like, oh, I myself need to be educated. You know, there's a lot of new terms out there. I think I've seen couples over time with women and or men stepping out of the relationships and it kind of caving the whole relationship. And, you know, the kid that tried to take your kids away because you know, your husband decided he wanted to be gay. Well, now he shouldn't be with our children. And I'm like, they don't have anything to do with each other, you know.
Yeah.
But I also hear what you're saying, which is also, why don't we look at why you stepped out, and could could you still come back together and perhaps there's something here?
We have really good research that shows that if you recommit to each other after infidelity and do the hard work, and it's hard, your relationship will be better than it was before. But it's not because of the infidelity. It's because you weren't talking about and transparent enough before the infidelity, and should have been all along, so that once you were that way, the relationship is stronger.
I agree with that. And when
Yeah.
you tell people that, so if, people come in for mediation, my first question is, are you sure you both want this? Because there's one person who does and one person who doesn't. And I think if there's one person who does, you can just open it up in a different way, because you get a lot of people in for, infidelity.
Yeah.
And I think infidelity is just a sign that there's something, it's a message. There's something wrong here that we're not able to communicate about. And if you can look at it that way, then, you can work it out. And I agree with you about you come back stronger and different.
Yes. And I always like to say, it's not always about the couple. Like Esther Perel says, you might be looking not for another partner, another self. And it might be just something that you're going through, a midlife thing, whatever. And it ends up you step out of the relationship. There's so many reasons.
There are so many reasons. And so I want to talk about the youth just for a second here, because I've been listening to some things, reading some things where they're talking about, because children are so on their screens, and especially during COVID, that their ability in the future, and I know you can't predict, but the ability in the future for the kids growing up today to be able to have conversations, which is like you're talking, sexually healthy conversation, is going to be very difficult because there's so much screen time. Kids don't talk on the phone. Everything's through a text. There's not really this ability to communicate. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Kort?
I think it's true. I think, I think it's a lot of things. Sometimes they communicate more and better because they're doing it online, right? So they have more permission, less inhibition. I do know that the young generation is way more sexually literate than our generation, way more. And I always tell therapists, you're going to get left behind. These clients are coming in and they want to talk about sex, and they know more than you because they're on the internet. At the same time, I agree with you. They don't have relational skills. They don't have people skills. A lot of people will misunderstand men have erectile disorders. And a lot of them, it's because it's easy to go to porn, because porn doesn't judge you. It's always available. It's like the good mother. It never says no. It's always right there. A person causes all kinds of anxiety. So people want to blame the porn. It's not the porn. It's the fact that he's not negotiating with another live human being. And that's what's happening. Live human contact is going to interrupt people's relational skills.
Well, is that where it's your partner's responsibility to kind of help that be a safe space where it's a judgment-free zone and we're in this together? I mean, is there, obviously, if that was the case, I would imagine you'd want to help work with that partner if someone has erectile dysfunction, if it's not for kind of a biological reason or physiological, but
right.
If it's more emotional, which I think a lot of it is for men, is it because their partner, they don't feel safe with the partner, and that partner needs to be adjust what they're doing to make it a more safe space?
The younger men are just overly anxious. They don't know what's normal. They've only seen sex through porn, and they don't have, well, there's another word for wanting to work with kids, is porn literacy. Do you know in Norway, they show in junior high and high school clips of pornography, and they'll show it for a few minutes and they'll stop and say, what was missing here? What should have happened here? What kind of sexual health conversation do you imagine these couples are having? Is this normal? Is that normal? Is that not normal? They do this so by the time they're adults, they have sexual and porn literacy. We don't do that in this country. We go quiet, we ban it, we limit it, and we make everybody shut up.
That's wow. I did not know that. See,
Yeah.
now as like a former teacher, I'm like, now porn in the classroom, and because adults don't deal with it effectively, the kids get out of control with it and make silly out of it because they know the adults are uncomfortable as it is.
Yep. Yep.
So that, I mean, how refreshing would that be? Because they also have lower pregnancy rates and everything else. So
yes,
too, because I think there's a higher respect for what sexual health is.
Yes, and lower rates of sexual violence as well.
Oh, that's a good point too.
Yeah.
Well, I think that when you think of porn, I think people think it's violence against women.
Right. And then but nobody talks about horror movies. I'm a huge horror movie fan. And it's always the woman who's having the predator against her. All the men are killed and the woman is left to flee for her life and violently by this predator. But everyone's like, well, that's cool. But let's talk about what happens to her in porn. Why? Because now it's sexual and people are erotophobic. They're sexually disgusted by what's happening. When you sexualize something, then people's disgust response goes up. But a horror movie, nobody's masturbating to it. We're good with that.
But not everybody just by nature, never mind. I know it's kind of environment and nature is kind of hard to delineate sometimes, but not everybody will be comfortable with porn. But that doesn't mean they can't find something else sexually to enhance their sex life with their partner, right?
Absolutely. Oh my God, there's so many things. There's lots of people that don't like watching sexual imagery or explicit content like that. So they find pleasure around body, sensations, tantra work, postponing orgasm. There's so many ways to have great sex without having sexual imagery.
Gotcha. And so if you had to give a couple of tips for couples, let's say that whether married or not, whether gay, straight, doesn't matter. What are some tips that you think at least a good place for people to start to be able to have sexually healthy conversations?
I start with people telling them to make a sexual vision, sexual relationship vision. Here's what I like to do sexually, and I'm going to do this all on my own. And you make your vision, and you do it all on your own. And then let's come together and talk about the things that we wrote down that are mutual, and make a mutual list. And then the things that aren't mutual, we'll have dialogue about that. But like you said, non-judgmentally, right? In a way that, and that's hard to do. I get it. People have to deal with their reactivity. Again, their disgust responses. I can't believe you're into that, but without doing it in a way that's shaming to a partner. And then if they can't do that, I tell couples to go online and read about erotica. There's so much on the internet that you can read. They're calling it, for women, they're calling it cliterature. You ever heard of this?
No.
I love it. So Shades of Grey. It's called cliterature. And New York Times bestselling books. There's a book called Becoming Cliterate. And it's a wonderful book. And right, so why not?
I think I love the name.
So do I.
I think it's brilliant. And as women, I think women, I can't speak for men, but women don't know their own bodies. And if they started to get to know their own bodies, they would be able to have the conversation, but they would be very shy about having that conversation unless they had an open man. But I think men are much more open about a dialogue about wanting to please their partner.
Yes. Oh my God. Men are so much more open to it. Sometimes they're too open to it. Sometimes they don't know how to, pace themselves for the woman. But, you don't see that with two men or two women. The pacing, I mean, they know how to pace themselves. They're two people of the same gender. You don't see that.
You don't see that.
Not as much. Not that it never happens.
Right.
It doesn't happen as much.
Yeah, I think educating women as much as I think listen, I had women's health class. I was in women's studies in college and I had women's health classes. And I still remember I learned so much in those classes because I had no sex ed help, anything prior to college. Like there was just, you're out there on your own, figure it out. Your parents certainly weren't talking to you. But I can see even with my friends that are my age or younger, that there's still so much to learn that we as women don't talk about.
Yes.
So it's a necessary conversation.
Yeah. And Lori Mintz is the author of Becoming Cliterate. And when I've seen her present, she says, I can't believe I wrote this book. I really wanted people to have it, but it's unnerving a little bit that I had to write the book because we've been through all this. Everything I've written has already been said and done, but it doesn't stick. We don't care about women's sexuality. And the only time we care about men's sexuality is when men are in trouble. So they have to do something non-consensual or be sexually abused or have some kind of problem around it.
Or be put in some program or something.
Right.
Or, you hone down your sexual desire if you want to be back in this marriage because I'm not watching porn. Okay, well, then we can shift it and do something else. But I think it's kind of that black and white, either or.
Right. There's a great therapist. She's a couples therapist, and her name's Ellen Bader. And she says, when you forbid a partner from doing something, you invite secrecy. And I love that. It's so true.
That is true. Wow.
It doesn't mean people misunderstand it. Well, you mean I can't have boundaries? You can say, hey, that doesn't work for me. I don't want this in the relationship, but you can't do that. And I'm the police and I'm going to tell you what you can even think. That is a recipe for bad news.
Yeah. Or if you do that, I'm out of here. And
Right.
that never works.
No, because then the other person's not going to tell. They don't want to lose you and they still want to negotiate with you, but that's a non-negotiable sentence.
Yeah, it's a line in the sand, right? And
Right.
so you can't have a relationship with a line in the sand. Well, this is really enlightening, and I'm actually all your references to some of these books and stuff. I'm going to put on the details below. And can you give me the name of your organization again? Your business. You were saying that.
Yeah, so it's modernsextherapyinstitutes.com.
Okay.
And it's co-directed by myself, right? Dr. Rachel Needle, Dr. Ricky Siegel. And we offer PhDs for therapists on clinical sexology and just certifications. If you want to be with the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, it's called ASECT. They're the certifying body, and our school provides you with everything you need if you want to become sexually informed therapist. And I think every therapist should, even if they don't become certified, should have some sexual information knowledge.
Well, it's almost like treating a client and missing a huge part of their lives, right? So you can treat them for anxiety, depression, but that is also part of your life, and it might help with some things.
Right, and then therapists will say to me, well, I only go with what they bring up. I don't intrude and ask. I'm like, well, if a partner or a client never brings up trauma, but you know it's there, you don't bring it up until they do? Well, of course I bring it up. Sex needs to be brought up too. You need to ask sexual health questions as well.
Yeah, that should be that's the holistic approach, right? The whole person, and our sex lives and our sexuality is part of our whole.
Our sexual pleasure is important.
Yes, it's not just the negative pieces, what's not working, but also what is working. And
Totally.
can we get more of that, right? Well, thank you so much. This has been, I could stay here all day. I love this conversation. I love when I walk away learning something. So I really appreciate your time. I'll put the details below, and if people like to contact you, that will be there for them. It'll be email, or do you want your phone number on there too, Dr. Kort?
Probably just my email. It's joekort@joekort.com.
Okay, yep. I'll put that down then. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you,
I might be back in touch on another topic with you. So this was so informative. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
All right, you too. Bye.